So here is my NAS server. I think I've already mentioned how I did it before and all that fun stuff. And I'd like to talk about it a little bit, what I did. Let's start from kind of the beginning. I'm using a H700 RAID controller card that's essentially what the physical hard drives are plugging into. There's 4 of them by 4 terabyte drives times 4. And the controller through the BIOS has them configured into a RAID 10. When the system boots up, it presents a virtual disk, which is the array itself. So at that point, it's not even like a physical device, it's a virtual disk that's a layer on top that forms the array. And then we boot into ESXi, and that is the hypervisor, which allows us to take that virtual disk and put the data store that ESXi uses on it, which is that whole VMFS, that file structure system thing. And from there, we can now create virtual disks on top of that. So there's multiple layers going on here. And if something goes wrong in one of them, let's say something went wrong in the array, there's going to be some huge fucking problems that'll just trickle straight up and mess everything up. So this is probably not the best approach. But at the same time, I mean, this is supposed to be enterprise grade stuff, and I'm just curious. It's more like for science and just for learning purposes and experimentation, just 'cause. Why do I still have this YouTube comment popping up? Yeah, someone's commenting on one of these through the eyes of Necrosis. Maybe people want me to make them. That's cool. I'll keep making them. I'll read the comment later. So I have a virtual disk I made. And if we go back into my administration system thingy, let's go to the data store, the Necropolis Data Center. Can I just right click and explore from here, or oh wait, maybe I can browse files. So the data store is on the RAID 10, and then from within the data store there's the folder that has the virtual machine for my NAS, which, as you know, or not, well, you do now, is just a Windows server. So no ZFS or any of that fun, fancy stuff. I got my reasons. And a lot of it's just familiarity. So the virtual disks themselves, there's the, boom, right there. This is the NAS, the OS that it would have made initially. This is what the virtual machine is running, is on that drive. And I've already talked about my industrial thing. I'm going to be doing something with this a little later, but I have one virtual disk, a little under 200 gigs. And then I have this guy I made that was, I think I made it at 6 or was it 7? I think 7 terabytes out of the 8 available, roughly. So I just made one big ass fucking virtual disk, and that's what's getting passed into the NAS server, as I'm calling it, virtual machine here. Where are you? Right here. So You can see a loading screen. There, hard disk. So as you can see, this is that big ass hard disk, and this is actually where I made it. I did like add, I went into here and I selected new hard disk and I made it this way. And I did a thick provisioning. It makes sense to me not to do that thin thing. Like we want, 6 or 7 terabytes. And I rather just allot that whole chunk than to constantly resize it as it grows. I think it's a performance thing as well. I don't know how fragmentation works on a hypervisor. Now, my understanding is it's not likely a good idea to defragment on the guest operating systems because of the way something works, but I don't know what happens on the data store level either. Does ESXi do anything to defragment its own data store? Because, if each virtual disk is in like their own cluster or sequential row or whatever you want to call it, because I don't know what the hell to call it, it would make sense, but I don't even know how any of it is done or if anything is done. I'm just going to assume it has something in place and I'm not supposed to worry about it. But I have that hard disk, and then of course, manage other disks. We have that industrial one, which is the shared. I think I talked about this before. This one is a multi-writer on the sharing, which allows me to mount it into my subsonic machine as well. Since it can't go over the network to find the music, it has to be like on a local disk. I'm able to pass that disk into there. We already talked about that though, I'm pretty damn sure. So these are all virtual disks. That's it. I'm not passing a physical hard drive in. It's all abstracted through these different layers. So one thing goes wrong and a lot of things can go wrong. But then who knows what cool stuff I'll learn out of that kind of experience if it happens. And I think I showed how to do this, but I'll do it again just for a moment. So when I had made that drive, a lot of times when you add a new drive, existing or just new, you may need to go into, I just start typing disk manager, and then when I see this create and format hard disk, boom, that's the one you want. And you would scroll down to where the disk is. It may have like a little symbol here. You may have to select online, and then you have to format it. And this is the first thing I've been sitting here trying to figure out and decide, and I don't know. I still don't know. So when I saw the option, I right-clicked and I went to format, and I looked in here and I saw that there's a different file system available, this REFS, which I guess was introduced sometime around Windows 2012. I read up a little bit on it, and it looks like it has ways of preventing or protecting you from the quote-unquote bit rot, where information just gets corrupted just by sitting there for a long time and one little bit just kind of flips. And I don't believe a RAID can on its own save you from that. That's where like certain specialized file systems come into place. And I guess REFS is Microsoft's version, but from what I'm reading, I couldn't take advantage of that without using some extra feature with it. And it would create like a mirroring type of thing. And ultimately, it's like I would have half the space of half my space. So what? Because I'm already RAID 10. And so I tried it at first. I did it. I formatted it that way and tested it out. It worked fine. It didn't have any issues. But it just kept eating away at me. My brain doesn't know. So I ended up formatting it again. I did NTFS, and I gave 64K a shot, and it actually did perform much faster when I'm doing syncing and stuff. So for now, that's how I formatted it. And I think I'm going to make a new music collection disk and format it in the same way, because right now it's using the default. And if I understand allocation unit sizes correctly, a drive like that has thousands upon thousands of individual like MP3 files, it may benefit speed-wise or performance-wise in some way or other by having that 64K or something along those lines. So I'll experiment with that a little bit. But that was the formatting part. And I can take the drive, you go to properties. If you're sharing on a network with Windows, anything like Vista and on, there's something you have to keep in mind. First, go to sharing, go advanced sharing. You have to pick a name to add, and then you got to go into permissions, and it should say everyone in here. If you're not on a public network, or otherwise, if it's just a private network, no one else has access to it, it's just you don't want to deal with the inconveniences, then that's what I'm assuming. You click everyone, and you tick the top box so everything is full control. And then you hit OK. Then you would hit OK, and then you're not done yet. You would then go to security, and this is where you have to do something. And in my case, instead of picking a specific user or something along those lines, I have everyone. And if it doesn't show up, you go to edit, you would hit add, and you type in something like everyone in this case, and then hit check names. There it is. So you can add the users like that. I'm going to hit cancel. So if you wanted to log in, the one that your system's using might already be in there, depending on this or that. But in my case, we're just using this for now. But you got to, whatever one you're using, hit allow, and then you hit OK. And then this drive will now show up in the network and be accessible without with actual, I can copy files to it, I can delete files and copy from it and all that fun stuff without having to do the login, since I was using everyone, but you don't have to do it that way. And one of the other benefits for me, and I think I may have already recorded this too, I don't know, is this little tool here, Free File Sync. If you install this program, be sure to do it carefully. It's free, but it has malware on the installer optionally. Whichever version I installed, for some reason, didn't, like, it detected malware when I scanned it with ESET, but it's as if they left it out on that specific version for some reason. I don't know why. Like, it never even tried to install it. It never even tried to ask me or anything. So I don't know what the deal there is. Maybe they left it and disabled it for some reason. But through the use of the Windows task scheduler, I'm able to do a few extra things on the NAS virtual machine. Now, I run a lot of backups on my system in the form of image copies of the system, and I'm probably going to make a video recording on that at some point, but not right now. You already saw me do stuff like this with the Aomi. Same idea. So there's my current set of backups for the last week or so. And in this case, I had using free file sync, a simple thing that will allow me to automate the process of making a backup and mirroring it only onto the NAS hard drive. So I still have it on my original system, but at least I have a copy here in the file system, in the file server. And when I saved it as a batch job. That's what created the file that you see here. So if this is something interesting, do look it up. It's a really nice program. I used it all the time for my music because there's like 4 or 5 copies of my music on different machines. Doesn't necessarily help you with bit rot or whatever, but I don't know. I got to get off of that. But yeah, if you use Windows Task Scheduler, this task scheduler, you can create a task schedule to run, say, on every 6 hours or something like that. In this case, this one will just run, and there's nothing changed. So it's just boom, nothing, boom, gone, and it's automated. So I always have those available to me. Should something go wrong and the copy on my machine doesn't work right or something happen, I have an extra. So that's a nice little side benefit I get from being able to do this.